Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he climbed down from the construction crane. The Detroit skyline stretched out before him, filled with half-built towers and renovation projects that seemed to multiply every week. 6 months had passed since the aliens came, and somehow the world kept turning. People still needed buildings, still needed work done, and Jake still needed the money. The walk home to his apartment took 20 minutes through streets that looked different now. Not because of damage or destruction, but because of the small, alien creatures that followed people everywhere. The Vorthax looked like a cross between a cat and a small bear, covered in soft gray fur with large, dark eyes that seemed to see everything. They stayed close to their human partners, sometimes riding on shoulders, sometimes walking alongside, always touching or staying within arm's reach. Jake watched his neighbor Amy Collins as she unlocked her apartment door. Her Vorthak sat in, her arms like a content baby, making soft purring sounds. Amy looked more relaxed than Jake had ever seen her. Before the aliens came, she had been stressed about her job at the bank, always worried about deadlines and performance reviews. Now she smiled all the time and seemed to float through her days without a care in the world. When Jake reached his own door, he could hear sounds from inside, small scratching noises and what might have been tiny footsteps. He turned the key, slowly, and stepped inside. The apartment was dim, lit only by the fading sunlight through his one window. In the far corner, behind his old couch, he could see 2 large, dark eyes watching him. The Vorthak had arrived 3 days ago, delivered by a team of scientists from the Global Integration Program. Dr. Lisa Hamilton had explained the process. To Jake, in simple terms, every human adult would receive a companion from the Galactic Wellness Consortium. The aliens were designed to help humans deal with stress and emotional problems. They would form bonds with their assigned humans and help them live happier, more peaceful lives. But Jake's alien was different. When the delivery team had placed the small gray creature in his apartment, it had immediately run to the farthest corner and refused to come out. Dr. Hamilton had looked puzzled and checked her paperwork twice. She had assured Jake that this was probably just an adjustment period and that the alien would warm up to him soon. 3 days later, nothing had changed. The alien, whose identification tag read something that sounded like Kethlar, stayed in its corner during the day and only moved around when Jake was at work. Jake knew this because he came home to find his few dishes washed and small piles of his belongings organized neatly. The alien was definitely active, but it wanted nothing to do with him directly. Jake set his lunchbox on the kitchen counter and looked across the room at the corner where Kethlar hid. The alien's eyes reflected the light from the window, watching Jake's every movement but ready to retreat further if Jake took even one step in its direction. This was not how things were supposed to work. Jake had heard stories from his co-workers about their aliens. Bill from the crane crew said his Vorthak helped him sleep better than he had in years. Maria from the office said her alien seemed to absorb all her worries about her sick mother. Even tough guys like Danny from the welding team talked about how much calmer they felt with their companions around. Jake felt rejected and confused. He had always been a loner, but this felt different. The alien was supposed to want to help him, supposed to be drawn to him somehow. Instead, it acted like Jake was dangerous or contaminated. Maybe there really was something wrong with him. Maybe he was too damaged or too stressed for even an alien designed to handle human problems. The apartment fell into its usual evening silence. Jake heated up a frozen dinner and ate it while sitting on his couch, trying not to look toward the corner where Kethlar remained hidden. The alien had not eaten anything since arriving, as far as Jake could tell. The special food pellets the scientists had provided sat untouched in their bowl. After dinner, Jake tried to watch television, but his eyes kept drifting to the corner. Sometimes he thought he saw Kethlar move slightly, but whenever he focused his attention there, the alien would freeze completely. It was like living with a ghost that was afraid of being seen. Around 10 o'clock, Jake decided to try something different. Instead of going directly to his bedroom as he usually did, he sat on the floor near the middle of the room, far enough from Kethlar's corner to not seem threatening but close enough to be heard if he spoke quietly. "I don't know what's wrong," Jake said to the empty room. "Everyone else seems to be getting along fine with their aliens. Maybe you got stuck with the wrong person." He paused and looked at his hands, rough and scarred from years of construction work. "My dad used to say, I was too hard to get close to. Maybe he was right." Jake waited for some kind of response, but the corner remained silent. After a few minutes, he stood up and went to his bedroom. As he was closing the door, he thought he heard a very soft sound from the living room. It might have been a sigh, or it might have been his imagination. The next morning, Jake woke up to find something new in his apartment. On his coffee table, where nothing had been the night before, sat a small sculpture made from bent pieces of wire and bottle caps. It was crude, but clearly intentional, shaped like a tiny human figure with arms outstretched. Jake stared at it for a long time, then looked toward the corner where Kethlar watched him with those large, dark eyes. For the first time since the alien had arrived, Jake felt something other than confusion and rejection. The sculpture was not much to look at, but it meant that Kethlar was paying attention to him, was aware of him as more than just a threat to avoid. Maybe this alien was different, but maybe that did not have to be a bad thing. Jake picked up his lunchbox and headed for the door. As he left for work, he made sure to speak clearly toward the corner. "Thank you for the sculpture. I like it." He thought he saw those dark eyes blink once, but he could not be sure. Dr. Lisa Hamilton knocked on Jake Morrison's apartment door at exactly 9 in the morning, carrying her tablet and a bag of monitoring equipment. This was her third visit in 2 weeks, and each time she left more puzzled than before. The global integration program was running smoothly across the entire planet, with success rates above 90%. Every region reported the same thing. Humans were calmer, happier, and more at peace with their alien companions. Every region except for a few scattered cases like Jake's. Jake opened the door looking tired. His work clothes were already dirty, even though the day had barely started, and Dr. Hamilton noticed the dark circles under his eyes had gotten worse since her last visit. Behind him, she could see the apartment was neat and organized, but she knew that Kethlar was somewhere in the shadows, avoiding contact as always. "How are things going with your companion?" Dr. Hamilton asked as she set up her equipment on Jake's kitchen table. She had stopped using the alien's name after Jake mentioned he had given it one. The scientists preferred to keep things clinical and simple. Jake shrugged and poured himself coffee from an old machine that looked like it had seen better days. "Same as always. Kethlar stays hidden. I go to work, and when I come home there are little sculptures made from trash." He gestured toward a shelf near the window where a dozen small figures now stood in a row. Each one was different, crafted from wire, bottle caps, screws, and other discarded materials Jake had brought home from construction sites. Dr. Hamilton examined the sculptures with interest. No other Vorthak had shown any creative behavior. In fact, most of them spent their time either pressed against their human partners or sleeping in close contact. The idea of a Vorthak working independently, especially on something artistic, Went against everything the Galactic Wellness Consortium had told them about the species. "Tell me about your daily routine again," Dr. Hamilton said, pulling out her tablet to take notes. "When do you first notice the alien is active?" Jake sat down across from her and rubbed his face with both hands. "I wake up around 5:30 to get to the job site by 7. When I leave, Kethalar is usually in the corner behind the couch. When I come home around 6, the place is always different somehow. Cleaner, more organized, and there's usually a new sculpture somewhere." "But you never see the alien during these activities?" "Never. Sometimes I think I hear sounds when I'm in the bathroom or bedroom, but if I try to look, everything goes quiet." Jake paused and stared out his window at the building across the street. "Yesterday I tried staying home sick to see what would happen. Kethler didn't move the entire day. Didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't make anything. Just watched me from the corner like I was some kind of threat." Dr. Hamilton made notes on her tablet, comparing Jake's situation to her other cases. The contrast was striking. Amy Collins from down the hall had reported that her Vorthak had helped her sleep through the night for the first time in months. Her stress levels had dropped so dramatically that she was considering asking for more responsibilities at work. Similar stories came from across the city, across the country, across the world. "Let's talk about your background again," Dr. Hamilton said. "I want to make sure I have all the details correct." Jake's expression grew guarded, the way it always did when she asked personal questions. "What do you want to know?" "Start with your childhood. Family situation, early experiences, that sort of thing. My mom left when I was 8. My dad raised me alone until he died of cancer 3 years ago. We didn't have much money, so I started working construction jobs while I was still in high school. Been doing it ever since." Jake spoke in short, flat sentences like he was reading from a report. "Any close relationships? Friends? Romantic partners?" "Not really. Dad always said I was too independent for my own good. Most people find me hard to get along with." Jake looked down at his coffee cup. "Maybe that's why Kethalar won't come near me. Maybe I'm just not the type of person who can form bonds." Dr. Hamilton continued taking notes, but something about Jake's story troubled her. On paper, he should have been an ideal candidate for the Vorthak program. High stress levels, social isolation, unresolved grief from losing his father. The aliens were supposed to be drawn to exactly these kinds of emotional problems. Yet Jake's alien behaved as if it was afraid of him. "Has your work performance changed since Kethalar arrived?" she asked. "Not really. I still show up on time, do my job, go home. Same as always." This was another anomaly. In every other case, Dr. Hamilton had observed changes in human behavior within days of receiving their companions. People became more relaxed, less driven, more focused on comfort and emotional well-being. Productivity in many industries had dropped as workers spent time bonding with their aliens instead of focusing on tasks. Dr. Hamilton spent another hour interviewing Jake, documenting every detail of his interactions with Kethalar. When she finally packed up her equipment, she was no closer to understanding what made this case different. As she headed for the door, she noticed Jake watching her with a mixture of hope and resignation. "Am I broken?" Jake asked quietly. "Is there something wrong with me that makes the alien not want to help?" Dr. Hamilton paused with her hand on the doorknob. She had been asking herself the same question, but from a scientific rather than personal perspective. "I don't think you're broken, Jake. I think you and your companion just have a different kind of relationship than we expected." After leaving Jake's apartment, Dr. Hamilton drove across the city to visit 3 more cases. Each one followed the same pattern she had documented hundreds of times. Humans and Vorthax in constant physical contact, dramatic reductions in stress and anxiety, increased dependency on the alien's presence for emotional stability. At her last stop, she visited Robert Kane, a factory worker who had been struggling with anger management issues before receiving his companion. Robert answered the door with his Vorthak wrapped around his shoulders like a living scarf. The alien purred softly, and Robert smiled with the kind of peaceful expression that had become common across the human population. "How are you feeling today, Robert?" Dr. Hamilton asked. "Better than ever. I can't imagine life without Buddy here." Robert stroked his alien's fur gently. "I used to get so angry about everything. Work problems, traffic, bills. Now none of that seems important. Buddy helps me stay calm and happy." "Have you been going to work regularly?" "Most days. Sometimes I call in sick because Buddy needs extra attention, but my supervisor understands. A lot of people are doing the same thing now." Dr. Hamilton made her notes and left Robert's house feeling more confused than ever. The program was working exactly as designed for the vast majority of humans. Stress levels were down, conflict was reduced, and people reported higher satisfaction with their lives. But they were also becoming less productive, less motivated, and increasingly dependent on their alien companions. That evening, Dr. Hamilton sat in her office reviewing data from around the world. The pattern was consistent everywhere. Humans were happier but less capable of independent action. In some regions, essential services were struggling because workers preferred to stay home with their companions rather than tackle difficult or stressful jobs. She thought about Jake Morrison, alone in his apartment with an alien that refused to touch him, still going to work every day, still pushing through problems without help or comfort. By every measure the program used to define success, Jake was a failure. But he was also the only human she had met who seemed unchanged by the alien presence, who maintained his independence and drive even in the face of rejection. Dr. Hamilton opened a new file on her computer and began typing a report about anomalous cases in the integration program. She had a feeling that Jake and his reluctant companion might be more important than anyone realized. Commander Ryan Blake arrived at Dr. Hamilton's office without warning on a Tuesday morning, carrying classified files that would change everything. He was a tall man with gray hair and the kind of serious expression that came from years of military service. Dr. Hamilton had never met him before, but she recognized his type immediately. Someone who dealt with problems that regular people were not supposed to know about. "We need to talk about your anomalous cases," Commander Blake said as he sat down across from her desk. "Specifically, we need to talk about what's happening on other worlds in the Galactic Wellness Consortium." Dr. Hamilton set down her coffee and gave him her full attention. Information about other alien worlds was classified far above her security level. The fact that Commander Blake was here meant something serious was happening. "I've been tracking similar programs on 12 other planets," Blake continued, opening one of his files. "The Vorthak integration process has been used successfully for over 200 years across multiple species. The results are always the same: reduced conflict, increased happiness, complete social stability." "That sounds positive," Dr. Hamilton said, though something in Blake's tone suggested otherwise. "It is, until you look at what happens 5 to 10 years after integration." Blake slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a city that looked like it had been built by an advanced civilization, but the buildings were crumbling and overgrown with vegetation. This is Kepler 442b, where the Zephyrians received Vorthax 8 years ago. The entire species has essentially stopped advancing. No new technology, no exploration, no growth. They spend their days in perfect contentment with their companions, while their civilization slowly decays. Dr. Hamilton studied the photograph and felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying the Vorthax are deliberately sabotaging these species? Not sabotaging, pacifying. The Galactic Wellness Consortium presents itself as a benevolent organization dedicated to reducing suffering, but their real purpose appears to be conquest through dependency. Blake opened another file showing charts and graphs. Every species that accepts the Vorthax program eventually loses its drive for progress, exploration, and independent problem-solving. They become docile and manageable. But the aliens seem genuinely helpful. I've seen the reduction in stress and conflict among humans. That's exactly the problem. The Vorthax don't just absorb stress, they absorb the human capacity to deal with stress independently. Over time, people become completely unable to function without their companions. Blake leaned forward. We estimate that within 5 years, human civilization will be as stagnant as the Zephyrians. Dr. Hamilton thought about all the cases she had documented. The increased dependency, the reduced work performance, the way people prioritized their alien companions over everything else in their lives. What had seemed like successful stress reduction now looked like systematic weakening of human resilience. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because your anomalous cases might be the key to resistance. We've identified roughly 3% of humans whose Vorthax exhibit the same avoidance behavior you've documented. All of these humans share certain characteristics: high trauma backgrounds, strong independence, and exceptional stress tolerance developed through adversity. Blake pulled out another file with Jake Morrison's name on it. Your construction worker is particularly interesting. His psychological profile shows severe chronic stress, but he functions at a higher level than most people with normal stress levels. His alien appears to be protecting him rather than trying to pacify him. Dr. Hamilton remembered her visits to Jake's apartment, the way Kethler watched from the corners, the strange sculptures that suggested intelligence and creativity rather than simple companionship. You think the Vorthax are capable of resistance? We think some of them retain enough individual consciousness to recognize what they're being used for. The sculptures, the organization of his belongings, the careful distance Kethlar maintains. These all suggest deliberate choices rather than programmed responses. That afternoon, Dr. Hamilton drove to Jake's apartment with more questions than she had ever brought before. When Jake opened the door, she could see immediately that something was different. His usual guarded expression had been replaced by something that looked like anger. I heard voices in the hallway last night, Jake said before she could speak. You and some military guy talking about conquest and pacification. Want to tell me what's really going on? Dr. Hamilton felt her heart sink. Jake had overheard her conversation with Commander Blake in the building's stairwell. She had thought they were speaking quietly enough, but construction workers developed good hearing for safety reasons. How much did you hear? She asked. Enough to know that these aliens aren't here to help us. Jake stepped aside to let her into the apartment. Enough to know that everyone else is being turned into some kind of pet, while I'm stuck with the one alien that won't even come near me. For the first time since Kethlar had arrived, Jake walked directly toward the corner where the alien usually hid. Dr. Hamilton expected the creature to flee, as it always did, but instead it remained perfectly still. Jake stopped about 3 feet away and crouched down to be at eye level with the small gray form. You've been trying to protect me, haven't you? Jake said quietly. All this time I thought you were rejecting me, but you were actually trying to keep me strong. Kethalar moved for the first time in Dr. Hamilton's presence. The alien took one small step forward, then another, until it was within arm's reach of Jake. Up close, Dr. Hamilton could see details she had missed before. The alien's fur had patterns that looked almost like writing, and its large dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed ancient and sad. Jake extended his hand slowly, palm up, and waited. After a long moment, Kethalar reached out with one small gray paw and touched Jake's fingers. The contact lasted only a few seconds before the alien pulled back, but it was the first physical interaction Dr. Hamilton had witnessed between them. "You're not from the consortium worlds, are you?" Jake continued. "You're from one of the places they conquered." Kethalar moved to one of its sculptures on the nearby shelf, a figure that Dr. Hamilton now realized looked like a Vorthak standing over a fallen city. The alien touched the sculpture with one paw, then looked back at Jake with what could only be described as profound sadness. The sculptures aren't just art, Dr. Hamilton realized. They're historical records, messages. You've been trying to communicate the truth about what happened to your people. Jake stood up and looked at the collection of sculptures with new understanding. Tiny figures standing alone, cities in ruins, groups of aliens walking away from their homes. The story of species after species losing their independence and strength to Vorthak integration. "So what do we do about it?" Jake asked, looking directly at Dr. Hamilton. "How do we stop this from happening to humanity?" Dr. Hamilton thought. About Commander Blake's files, about the 3% of humans who seemed naturally resistant, about the possibility that some Vorthaks might be willing to help rather than conquer. For the first time since the integration program had begun, she felt something that had been missing from all her reports. Hope. "We fight back," she said. "And I think you and Kethalar are going to show us how." Jake Morrison's apartment became the center of something that had never existed before, a partnership between humans and Vorthaks based on mutual respect rather than dependency. Within 2 weeks of the revelation about the consortium's true purpose, Dr. Hamilton and Commander Blake had identified 47 other humans whose aliens showed similar resistance behaviors. They came from all walks of life, but they shared the same background of surviving hardship and developing strength through adversity. Maria Santos was a single mother who had raised 3 children while working 2 jobs after her husband died in a car accident. Her Vorthak, which she called Diego after her late husband, had spent weeks hiding behind her refrigerator before finally approaching her with small gifts made from her children's broken toys. Carlos Mendez was a veteran who had lost his leg in combat and refused to let disability stop him from rebuilding engines in his garage. His alien companion had been creating detailed mechanical drawings using scraps of metal and wire. Each resistant human brought their Vorthak to Jake's apartment for what Dr. Hamilton called deprogramming sessions. The process was different for every pair, but it always started the same way. The human had to acknowledge that their alien was not there to make life easier, but to preserve something valuable that was under attack. Jake's construction skills proved invaluable as the group grew. He showed them how to build hidden communication devices using salvaged electronics and how to create meeting spaces in abandoned buildings that would not attract attention from consortium monitors. Kethalar worked alongside him, using its small hands to manipulate delicate components that Jake's larger fingers could not handle. The aliens revealed more of their history through collaborative sculptures and drawings. Dr. Hamilton learned that The Vorthax had once been an independent species with their own cities and culture. The consortium had conquered them using the same integration process, but some individuals had retained enough consciousness to remember their past and resist their programming. These resistant Vorthax had been secretly embedded in integration, programs for decades, waiting for a species strong enough to fight back. The difference with humans, Dr. Hamilton explained to the group during one of their secret meetings, is that we actually get stronger from facing difficult situations. Most species in the galaxy develop comfort and safety, then lose their edge when challenged. Humans are the first species the consortium has encountered that thrives on adversity. Jake looked around the room at the gathered humans and their alien partners. Maria Santos sat with Diego on her lap, both of them working on a complex communication device. Carlos Mendez was teaching his alien how to read electrical schematics. Each partnership was unique, but they all shared the same quality. Neither the human nor the alien was trying to make life easier for the other. Instead, they were making each other more capable. "So what's the plan?" asked Linda Bell, a teacher whose Vorthak had been leaving complex mathematical equations written in dust on her classroom blackboard. "How do we stop the rest of humanity from losing their independence?" Commander Blake had been coordinating, with military units around the world, identifying soldiers and emergency responders whose aliens showed resistance behaviors. The consortium is planning to declare Earth pacified within 6 months. Once that happens, they'll begin resource extraction and population management. We need to be ready to resist when their ships arrive. Jake had been thinking about this problem from a construction perspective. We can't fight them with conventional weapons. They have technology we can't match. But we can make it impossible for them to control us. Over the next 3 months, Jake's apartment became a planning center for the most unusual resistance movement in human history. The resistant humans maintained their normal lives and jobs, but they spent every free moment preparing for what was coming. Jake's construction crew noticed he was more focused than ever, completing projects ahead of schedule and solving problems that had stumped other workers. What they didn't know was that Kethlar was helping him see structural weaknesses and design solutions that no human engineer had thought of. The alien partnerships evolved rapidly as trust developed. Kethlar began riding on Jake's shoulder when he worked on sensitive construction sites, using its empathic abilities to sense when other humans were nearby and helping Jake avoid detection. The alien's artistic skills expanded beyond sculpture to include detailed architectural drawings that showed Jake how to reinforce buildings and create hidden spaces. Maria Santos discovered that Diego could sense the emotional states of her children and help her address problems before they became serious. Instead of absorbing her stress about being a single parent, Diego helped her become a more effective mother by providing information she could not access on her own. Carlos Mendez found that his alien partner could perceive mechanical vibrations and heat patterns that human senses missed, making him the most skilled mechanic in his neighborhood. The non-resistant humans, meanwhile, continued to decline in independence and capability. Jake watched his neighbor Amy Collins become completely unable to function without her Vorthak. She had called in sick to work so many times to care for her alien that she was placed on permanent leave. Similar patterns emerged across the city, the country, and the world. Essential services began to break down as humans prioritized their companions over their responsibilities. Dr. Hamilton documented everything, building a comprehensive record of how the integration process was weakening humanity, but she also documented the growing strength of the resistance movement. The 47 resistant pairs had become a network of highly capable human-alien teams, each one specialized for different types of problems. "We're not just resisting conquest," she told Jake during one of their planning sessions. "We're evolving into something new, a form of cooperation between species that the consortium has never encountered." Jake looked at Kethlar, who was perched on his workbench creating a detailed map of the city's underground tunnel system. The alien had become his partner in every sense of the word, not making his life easier but making it more effective and meaningful. They challenged each other, protected each other, and accomplished things together that neither could have done alone. The final test came when Commander Blake received intelligence that consortium ships would arrive within 2 weeks. The resistant. Humans had to make their choice, remain hidden and hope to survive the occupation, or reveal themselves and fight for humanity's independence. Jake made the decision for all of them. "We don't hide," he told the group. "We show the consortium what happens when they pick a fight with a species that gets stronger under pressure." Kethlar chirped agreement and touched one of its sculptures, a tiny figure of a human and Vorthak standing together against a storm. The resistance was ready to become something the galaxy had never seen, a true partnership between species that made both sides stronger rather than weaker. The ships were coming, but humanity would not be the same helpless species that the consortium expected to find. Jake Morrison, construction worker from Detroit, and Kethlar, refugee from a conquered world, had shown them all a different way to face the future. Together. The consortium ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning, massive vessels that blotted out the sun over major cities. Most humans barely looked up from their Vorthak companions, their capacity for alarm or curiosity dulled by months of emotional pacification. But Jake Morrison stood on the roof of the Detroit construction site where he worked, watching the ships descend with Kethlar perched on his shoulder, both of them ready for what was coming. Commander Blake's voice crackled through the hidden communication network that Jake and his team had built throughout the city. "All resistance units, maintain normal behavior patterns. Let them think the pacification process worked perfectly." Jake climbed down from the roof and continued his work, installing reinforced support beams in the building's foundation. To any observer, he looked like just another human going through the motions of his job, while his alien companion provided emotional support. What they could not see was that every beam Jake installed was placed according to Kethlar's detailed architectural plans, creating a structure that could serve as both shelter and fortress when the fighting began. The consortium landing parties encountered exactly what they expected: a docile human population completely dependent on their Vorthak companions for emotional stability. Dr. Hamilton met with the consortium representatives as planned, presenting falsified reports that showed humanity had been successfully integrated into their system. The alien officials seemed pleased with her data, particularly the statistics showing reduced productivity and increased dependency on the Vorthaks. "Your species has adapted to the integration process more quickly than most," the lead consortium official told Dr. Hamilton. "We will begin resource extraction operations immediately and establish permanent monitoring stations to ensure continued stability." What the consortium did not know was that the resistance network had spent months preparing for this moment. Jake and 46 other humans had trained their Vorthak partners to use their empathic abilities as a communication system, allowing coordinated action across the entire planet without any electronic signals that could be detected. When the moment came to act, every resistance cell would move simultaneously. The signal came at sunset on the 3rd day of occupation. Jake felt it as a subtle shift in Kethlar's posture. A message passed through the network of resistant aliens. That meant one thing. Now. Jake activated the hidden controls he had built into the construction site's crane system. Instead of lifting building materials, the cranes began moving equipment that had been disguised to look like ordinary construction supplies. Electromagnetic pulse devices, communication jammers, and weapons that had been smuggled into the city. Piece by piece over the past months, across Detroit, similar scenes played out at dozens of locations. Maria Santos used her knowledge of the city's school system to coordinate evacuation routes for non-resistant humans and their aliens. Carlos Mendez activated hidden devices in the city's mechanical infrastructure, disrupting consortium monitoring, systems, and transportation networks. Linda Bell and her students had spent weeks mapping every consortium facility in the region, providing targets for the resistance teams. The consortium forces were caught completely off guard. Their intelligence, reports had indicated that humanity was fully pacified, incapable of organized resistance or independent action. Instead, they found themselves facing coordinated attacks from human Vorthak teams that seemed to anticipate their every move and counter their every strategy. Jake and Kethlar made their way through the city's underground tunnel system, following maps that the alien had spent months perfecting. Their destination was the primary consortium command ship, which had landed in downtown Detroit and established a control center in the city's tallest building. Jake carried climbing equipment and electronic tools, while Kethlar carried detailed plans of the ship's interior layout, information that the resistant aliens had somehow accessed through their connection to the consortium's systems. The building was heavily guarded, but Jake's construction experience had taught him to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. He scaled the outside of the building using maintenance access points that most people never noticed, with Kethlar using its small size and agility to scout ahead and warn him of guard positions. Inside the consortium command ship, Jake found technology beyond anything humans had developed, but also something he had not expected. Captured Vorthaks from other worlds, beings who had retained their consciousness and been imprisoned for resisting the integration process. Kethlar communicated with them through rapid chirps and gestures, and Jake realized that this rescue had been the aliens' plan all along. "You've been waiting for this chance for years," Jake said as he began disconnecting the containment systems. "This was never just about saving humanity. This was about liberating your own people." Kethlar touched Jake's hand briefly, a gesture that had become their signal of understanding and partnership. Together, they began systematically destroying the ship's control systems while freeing the imprisoned aliens. Each liberated Vorthak immediately began using its empathic abilities to disrupt the consortium's command structure, spreading confusion and panic through their forces. The battle for Earth lasted 18 hours, but it was unlike any conflict in the consortium's history. Instead of facing a unified military force, they encountered a distributed network of human-alien partnerships that operated independently but supported each other through shared intelligence and coordinated action. When one resistance cell was threatened, others would appear to help. When consortium forces adapted to one strategy, the humans would immediately switch to another approach. Jake and Kethlar